Canada have consistently dropped down the sort of happiness league table.
Well, actually, from 2015, we've gone from 5th to 25th. The 18th we went from 18th to 25th just in the last year.
So you were the 5th happiest country in the world, and now you're 25th.
That's right. And part of it is food. We have the worst food price inflation in the G7 today. It's due to a lot of hidden taxes that are baked into food production. We have an industrial carbon tax that it charges on farm equipment, fertilizer, and food producers. We have a new fuel tax that's just come in. Single-use plastic is now banned, which makes it so that food goes bad about 5 days quicker. So it sounds kind of very virtuous. We're not going to use plastic anymore, but it ultimately means food goes bad, and somebody pays for that. So I want to get rid of all of those taxes and fees and unnecessary regulations that do nothing for our health and safety so that we can have more affordable food. But more broadly, we have to get rid of the monetary inflation that I described. As I said, we've doubled our money supply in Canada from 1.4 trillion to 2.8 trillion in 10 years. So it is not actually that these things cost more. It's that the money with which we buy them is worth less.
Because
we're creating so much of it. And
why are you doing that?
To fund deficits.
To pay for debts.
That's right. And that's why all government, it's not just Canada, by the way, it's across the Western world. They're creating cash to fund deficits.
And the deficits come from having a big government.
Yes.
A government that's too big.
That's right.
That's too involved.
That's right. And the result is that we're creating cash faster than we grow food, build homes, or produce energy. And my mission, Stephen, is to flip that. I want us to create more of what cash buys by unblocking food production, energy production, and home building so that we add those things faster than we add the cash to the system.
I saw this graph here, this chart, which is GDP per capita with international counterparts. So on there it has Canada, United States, OECD, and it shows, it's quite stark. It shows that Canada has basically plateaued in terms of GDP per capita. For the average person, what is GDP per capita? What does that actually mean?
It's your income, really. It's ultimately, the GDP, the gross domestic product, is the value of all the things that you produce. If you're producing more per person, over time, people will see their wages rise, their real wages rise. If you don't produce more per person, then your wages are flat. And so that is what we've effectively had in Canada over the last 10 years.
Why?
Because we are not unlocking our resources. Our biggest industry is oil and gas, and it's locked behind very aggressive anti-development laws and bureaucracies because we're blocking home building and because we're overtaxing our population. We're punishing initiative with high taxes. The good news is that we can reverse all of these things. If we have the most pro-development and the fastest permits in the world, if we cut taxes on work, investment, home building, and energy, then we can massively increase our output of the things that we need to have a good life and the wages that people earn to buy it.
This seems to be a familiar story across some Western nations.
It is.
What are those Western nations, and what is the thing that they've all gotten wrong in common?
Well, I think that it's probably true in the UK and the European Union as well.
What did they do wrong?
Well, let's take Germany. They shut down their nuclear sector and they tried to effectively drive oil and gas out of their country. The end result was extremely high energy costs. And this was another intervention that took from working class people and gave to the very rich. Those who were able to get the subsidies for windmills and solar panels got fabulously wealthy, all very powerful people. But the workers in the plants and the mines of rural Germany ended up losing their jobs and paying higher prices for electricity, all of which, by the way, has been reversed because now the Germans are back to burning coal. So it did absolutely nothing for the environment. This is another example of government intervention totally screwing over the working class, a phenomenon across the Western world. And this is the big lie. The big lie is that when government gets big, it gives people their fair share. What it does, in fact, is it gives the money and the resources to those who have the most political power. Those people are all rich, and it pays for it by taking from the working class. So my mission in politics is to reverse that entire approach have a small government with big people, a meritocracy that rewards work, and a free enterprise system that requires businesses compete for workers with higher wages and consumers with lower prices.
I'm looking here at the GDP forecasts for various countries around the world, and the United States GDP forecast looks like it's been pretty strong relative to others. Canada looks like it's going down. 2025 estimates 1.7%, 26 estimates 1.3%. The United Kingdom as well seems to have been lagging, both the United States and Canada. And Germany, as you said, in 2024, their GDP growth was only 0.2%, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of percentages lower than the United States, Canada, or even the UK. But clearly there is a problem with GDP growth here for Canada, for the United States, for the United Kingdom, relative to a country like the United States. It looks like the United States are doing something right. If you look at GDP growth as the main measure.
Look, there are some policies that we can learn from. It's not just the United States, though. Look at Switzerland, for example. The Swiss are among the wealthiest in the world. They have the best money, the lowest inflation. They have almost no inflation in Switzerland, by the way. They have very strong money. The Swiss franc is the best currency in the world, better than the euro or the American dollar. What do they have? Free enterprise, small government. The share of the economy consumed by government spending is significantly lower than anywhere else in the Western world. Outside of Asia. And so they do very well. How is it that the Singaporeans have become one of the wealthiest nations on earth? They have no resources, literally nothing. They have to import their water, for God's sakes. They took a swampy, mosquito-infested island and three peoples who were struggling to survive in their homelands, and they came together and created the wealthiest country in the world outside of the Gulf states. Why? They have free enterprise. They have low taxes. It's easy to start a business. You're rewarded for your hard work. This is the kind of thing we could be doing.
So looking at the numbers of Singapore operates in a league of its own, outperforming both the UK, Canada, and the USA in terms of growth and per capita wealth. As a hub economy, it is currently riding the wave of the global AI boom because they've enabled entrepreneurship. And it is more than, from a GDP perspective, last year, more than double the United States GDP growth. And I mean, it's left Canada and the United Kingdom and even Switzerland in its tracks in that regard. Interesting.
It's a spectacular achievement. I mean, Lee Kuan Yew, who founded the country and created this miracle, should be studied by every leader in the world, because I don't think there's anyone who's been able to generate such a massive increase in the quality of life and to do it with literally no resources whatsoever, except for geography. And they managed to exploit their geography, as you said, to be kind of like modern day Nabateans. They're a trading hub for all of Asia.
Every sort of economic policy or philosophy does have a trade-off. I mean, it's one thing you learn as a podcaster, that there's just always trade-offs. And if you're not clear on what the trade-offs are, then they might surprise you.
Right.
I mean, you can talk about socialism or you can talk about capitalism, whatever. All of them have trade-offs. What are the trade-offs of your economic strategy and philosophy?
Well, the leadership has to have humility because it has to let go of power and turn it back to the people. And that is a very hard thing for politicians to do. No politician wants to have written on their gravestone, he stayed out of the way, left people alone so that they could do great things without him. Although I think we'd be better off if more of them did. But I should also say that there is a role for government. I'm not suggesting that there isn't. There should be a basic social safety net that provides the things that people who are less advantaged would not be able to have for themselves, to make sure that everyone has health care, even if they can't afford to pay for it, that there's basic schooling and roads and infrastructure. But what happens is that once you get beyond providing those basics and government starts to metastasize into, all kinds of other things that are not its core responsibility, each dollar spent has less and less return. And then it turns into a negative return where the more they spend, the more damage they do. And I think we're beyond that point on the curve.
Because I'm thinking about how immigration ties into all of this and to GDP growth. I think in Canada, from the research I was doing, there has been a decline in birth rates.
Yes.
So there's significantly less people getting married. There's significantly less people being born. So how does one run their economy when you're not having new children being born without bringing in lots of immigrants to help support that economy?
Well, first of all, I think we have to ask ourselves, why has the birth rate gone down? And I would argue that it's economic reasons. If you cannot afford a home, then you have no place to raise children. We have this phenomenon in Canada of 35-year-olds still living in their parents' basements. And how do you even get a date? I mean, how do you bring a date home? It's a challenge. Wow. If you're 35, and these are great high-achieving people who've got jobs, but they just can't afford a place to live, or they're stuck in a small apartment because that's all their paycheck will buy them in the way of rent. And so I think for those economic constraints, we have a lot of young people who otherwise would love to have children in their late 20s, early 30s, who simply have nowhere to raise them.
Am I right in thinking that a lot of these Western economies have allowed a lot of people into their countries to make up for the willingness or desire or the availability of people to do the sort of low wage jobs? Is this what's happened globally? Because it's what people tell me in the UK.
Yes, I think that a lot of multinational corporations have abused the immigration system in order to drive down wages. In Canada, for example, the government massively expanded the international student and temporary foreign worker programs, and that allowed corporations to pay artificially low wages to people who do not have the same mobility rights and opportunities. And that drove down wages, displaced people from their jobs, and ultimately ballooned housing costs. And so my position is that we need to cap numbers and ensure that the economy, healthcare, and housing grows faster than the population at all times.
If you cap numbers, does that mean that these corporations, these entrepreneurs, these companies don't have enough people to fill the roles in their companies and therefore have to move somewhere else? What does it mean?
No, we have unemployment. We have people without jobs. But some multinationals don't want to pay full wages. So they think, well, just undercut the wage by bringing someone in from a very poor country who's willing to work for a lot less and who has fewer rights because they can't leave the job to go to another employer. So it's kind of like Easy Street. And so my view is that when you've got unemployed people and you're trying to fill your workplace, pay higher wages. Give people a better return on their work.
You've got unemployment. Are those people trained and skilled and willing to do the jobs that Canada needs them to do?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have 100,000 unemployed construction workers. They could be building the homes that we need built. We have young people coming out of high school without a job. We have 30-year highs in unemployment among youth. They should be getting those jobs. And, Starbucks says, well, they don't want to take them. Well, maybe you're not paying enough. If you're not paying the right wage, then you're not going to get the right worker. But pay an equivalent wage and you'll attract a worker who will do the job.
Again, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
So, Starbucks increase wages.
Yes.
Which means that Starbucks then will increase the cost of a cup of coffee, presumably.
Well, unless they can find more efficient ways to run their systems. More competition in the system will allow the worker to gain more and the consumer to pay less. And the entrepreneur in the middle has to find ways to save and operate more efficiently. That's the magic of the market, is that everybody has a vested interest in driving the most value for the lowest cost.
One of the interesting ways lots of employers are finding ways to drive efficiencies is this new technology called AI.
Right.
And again, maybe somewhat ironically here, Anthropic, who are one of the world's leading AI companies, released a report 2 weeks ago. I'll throw the graph up on the screen, but it shows where job disruption will take place based on how people are currently using their tools. And one of the things they noticed is that there's been a increase by, I think, roughly 14% in youth unemployment, because entry-level jobs are the ones often in white-collar industries that are being taken out first.
Right.
And you hear these things and you go, oh, that's some stats and whatever, and it's, not necessarily tanked the economy yet. But as an employer of hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world now, I have started to notice that the case for hiring certain groups of people is becoming much more tricky now because of these tools. And it doesn't make me sound great saying that. It's not that we're not hiring hundreds of people, but there's this certain set. When I look at specifically entry-level grads, if they aren't really AI proficient, they are a lot less appealing in some roles than young grads that are extremely AI proficient. And the problem is not many of them are. And that just in a company like mine, if you're AI proficient, really irrespective of age, and you know how to build this thing called AI agents, it's kind of like you come with 50 team members of your own.
Wow.
That's what it's like. So I've got a kid called Kaz here. He's a young guy in his 20s. He's built a team of agents that now work for him. So hiring Kaz means I get Kaz and his team of agents because he's proficient in that technology. Most of the workforce hasn't been trained because of the education system to know a thing about this.
Right.
So it's becoming increasingly difficult to hire entry-level people, but actually all the way up the board, unless you have deep expertise in a domain, which would mean that I can get Kaz to make you the agents. So like on my CFO, for example, 50 years working in finance, etc., deep expertise. I just need her, and then she can build out a team of AI agents to work with her. Back in the day, if you'd got 5 years ago, I would have needed her and her to have a massive team of people.
Right.
I say all this to say that there's a certain group in society, people that have deep domain expertise and people that are technical, that I think are in higher demand than ever before. And everybody else, as AI continues to replace them through things like autonomous driving and robotics is around the corner, I think there needs to be a real conversation about what happens to these people.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. So throughout history, we've had these scares where new technological developments have threatened to replace, and in reality have replaced, certain human labor. So you had during the Industrial Revolution, machines were replacing muscular power, and then you had the Luddites who came and tried to smash those machines to protect their jobs. In the end, they just got different jobs with higher pay because they could do more with these machines, and they didn't have to walk behind a mule's ass pushing a plow in the hot sun all day. They had a tractor that would pull the plow, and so on and so forth. And then in the dot-com era, we were told again that people are going to lose their jobs to computers. In fact, they were made more productive by computers. Do you think this time is fundamentally different than those prior technological revolutions?
I would say, first thing is nobody knows. The second thing I'd say is yes.
Okay.
And the reason I'd say yes is just the speed of disruption. So unlike in the Industrial Revolution, where it takes some time for the new technologies to become adopted because of the nature of what those technologies were, this technology is built on the internet, which has global distribution. So OpenClaw is a good example of a technology that is very, to simplify it for the audience, it can do anything on my computer. So if I put a computer here on this table, I can text OpenClaw on WhatsApp and tell it to go on this podcast right now, look at the part of the conversation that was most replayed by the audience, clip it, add subtitles to it, tweet it, or send it to my Slack channel. I can get it to, I'll tell you something I did the other day. I was in my house in Los Angeles, and it was very, very hot because there's a heat wave at the moment. So I said to it, can you go on, take a look at my house online, buy me a umbrella that I can put because I like to work outside. I actually voiced it this. And what it did is it went on Google Maps. It looked all around my house from all around the outside because it knew where I lived for some bizarre reason. It knew that a charcoal umbrella at a certain size would suit that table out there. It went on Amazon, found the charcoal umbrella. It ordered it, arrives at my house.
And it transacted.
It transacted because it had my login details to transact on this particular website. So, but it's just, the framing is it can do anything that you would do on a computer. A lot of people work on computers, and the speed of adoption that we're seeing is staggering. So my concern is actually the sort of near-term displacement before we figure out the types of jobs that, the types of new jobs. And then with robotics on the way, you hear someone like Elon Musk saying that there'll be more humanoid robots than humans, and people say, well, he's saying that because he's got a vested interest.
Right.
However, what I'd say is his timelines have sometimes not been right. But when he said he was going to make those spaceships land on chopsticks, the spaceships eventually land.
Incredible. Oh, he's a brilliant mind. Don't underestimate him.
And my car out there drives itself without intervention. So I don't know. It's a really interesting time. I can both see why this technology is going to change the world for the better, and I believe it will. But then I'm just really concerned about certain economies and countries that aren't taking it seriously because they're so distracted by other things. Like a lot of them race baiting. A lot of them are like immigration seems to be the winning lever. Like to say the brown people are the problem. But I'm like, maybe the alien is something else. Maybe the alien are these agents that are actually going to take our jobs.
I believe the basic human need is meaning, to have a purpose in life. And often the question we have to ask is, how can we guide this revolution in technology so that it empowers people to do things that continue to give them meaning. I think it was John Adams who said something to the effect of, my father studied warfare so that I would have the security to study commerce. I study commerce so that my children will have the prosperity to study arts. If these new systems give us the ability to focus on the things that we love doing, that give us meaning in our lives, and that could be a different thing for each person, while at the same time supplying us with a lot of our material needs, it could be very positive. If it simply strips away our own utility and leaves lots of people without the ability to work at all, then it could be very, very dangerous to our lives. So I think that we have the public policy objective is to ensure that it becomes an enabler of humanity, not a replacement for it.